Happy Monday. Today is Monday, February the 7th, 2022. And I couldn't have possibly said that in a more awkward way, could I? Anyway, today's daily Bible readings come to us from Psalm 115, Judges 5, 1 through 11, and 1 Corinthians 14, 26 through 40. I'm going to take a look at passage from Judges and talk about long, lovely hair. Long, lovely hair. So Deborah and this dude Barak are kind of celebrating by singing a song, busting out some impromptu rhymes about their victory over this guy named Sizek. He was a bad guy who was, doing bad things to the people of Israel. And he was a hard man to pin down, but Jael, she took care of that. And it was a great victory, which Deborah, in the beginning of this, attributes to God's response to the people's dedication, the people's focus and their willingness to serve him. And she says, when locks are long in Israel, when the people offer themselves willingly. So what's that all about? All this idea of when locks are long in Israel. Well, there's this law in Leviticus 19, and then you see it again in chapter 21 that talks about, how they're supposed to wear their hair, specifically guys and then priests. So Leviticus 19:27 says, don't cut the hair at the sides of your head or clip the edges of your beard. So I've already messed that up. And then 21:5, specifically the priests, says priests must not shave their heads or shave the edges of their beards or cut their bodies. So this idea of like scarring yourself, because in a lot of the rituals of the ancient world, that's how you would show devotion. You'd slash yourself and bleed all over the place. You still actually see that practiced in some cultures today as a sign of religious devotion. You don't have to do that. So there's that. It's this idea of just simply being obedient to the law. And that could be a part of what Deborah's talking about. And like people, being obedient to the law, but there's lots of other things that she could have referenced that are probably more important than the haircutting thing. If you're going to talk about people being obedient to the law and God responding to that, specifically idolatry would be the big one off the top of my head. But I think there's also something else. There's in the book of Numbers, there's this idea of a Nazirite vow, which you see in the book of Judges. So there's more to it than just because the law says so. It's when we look at what's in number 6, it's the idea of willingness, the willing dedication of yourself to the Lord and the Lord's will. So you're dedicating yourself to a specific task, a specific calling, and you're making this vow and covenant before the Lord and before all your neighbors. It's the putting aside of what you want for the sake of what God wants, right? So God has put this calling on your life, and you put everything else aside, and you're not going to take any of that back up until that task is done, i.e., saving the people of Israel. So the locks in this are an outward sign. There's a lot of things they would do. Like they weren't allowed to drink wine or consume grapes. They couldn't have raisins, which some of you are okay with that. Some of you are like, oh, I love raisins. The locks, though, they weren't supposed to cut their hair. Like they're supposed to shave their head and their beard right at the beginning when they made this, and then they weren't supposed to touch it again until they had actually seen this thing through. So the locks are an outward symbol of that commitment. So Deborah wasn't just praising, that the people of Israel had this great flow going, which I lack entirely, but she was praising their change of heart. When the locks are long in Israel. So when the people dedicate themselves to following the Lord, things go really well. And she tells this whole big story about this is how bad it was. But we had it good back in these days of these other judges when we actually obeyed God and God sent the judges to save us. And now they're good again. Look what God's done for us. And, I think Deborah, her whole point in this song is like, maybe if we just kept doing this, and listening to God and letting our locks grow out, committing ourselves to his purposes, things would continue to go well. but they don't. The next chapter starts with, and the people of Israel screwed up again, basically. So anyway, that's the DBR for today. Get out. Don't go to Great Clips. Just let your locks grow, and we'll talk to you later. Boop.